Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geekoscopy 101, the podcast that explores the intersection between science, story, and play with me, your host, Dr. Yanis Kistan. And today we're exploring the science of the Last of Us video game with paleontologist Dr. Andrea Villa. Welcome to the show, Andrea. How are you doing?
Hi, hello everybody, hello Yanas, and I'm fine. What about you?
I'm doing really well, really excited to chat to you. I'm always keen to chat to a fellow Naughty Dog fan, but also a fellow geeky scientist, because I think there's a lot of us out there, but some of us don't like to put ourselves out there, just in case we maybe seem less professional. But I think those kind of days are kind of ending, which is nice. I think everybody is a geek about something. It might not be
Yeah,
like Lord of the Rings or video games, but everybody has that weird little hobby that they enjoy more than what seems normal. And today, that kind of hobby we're going to talk about is video games. But before we start, why don't you let everybody know, Andrea, who you are and what you do?
okay, sure. Well, I'm a paleo-herpetologist as a working title. This means that I work with fossils of amphibians and reptiles like frogs, lizards, and snakes, stuff like that, mainly from the Cenozoic of Europe. But sometimes I also go back to older stuff like in the Mesozoic. But mainly, yes, I work with fossils of amphibians and reptiles, and I'm currently working at the Institut Català de Paleontologia Miquel Crusafont in Barcelona. Even if I'm from Italy and I studied in Italy, but I am currently doing a postdoc here in Spain.
You can kind of tell that you're not from Spain because you pronounce it Barcelona, not Barcelona. Um, so why how I discovered you was that I recently got hooked on the Journal of Geek Studies, which is a initiative by Dr. Rodrigo Salvador and his colleagues, who essentially have this little kind of like a scientific journal, but people are able to like publish fun little things about geeky things like video games and movies and things like that. And you published a paper, I think, in the last issue, like in the recent issue. I don't think the
Yeah,
the issue is out yet. Like yours is just the online version.
no, it
About
was the 1st of January, the first of this
yeah,
new issue in
yeah.
January.
And the paper we wrote was essentially about looking at a naturalist point of view at what's going on with in the Last of Us video game series. So how did you even come across the Journal of Geek Studies? Where did you learn about it?
Well, I think that it could be either two ways. I don't remember actually the first thing that came, the thing that came at first. Uh, I do remember seeing a presentation at the first Paleo Virtual Congress. So it was an online congress organized by some people in Valencia here. It was completely online, and there was a presentation about this. And I think this is the moment when I decided to send something to them. But it might be that I also read something earlier because I do remember reading a paper about the nomenclature of beasts and creatures in the A Song of Ice and Fire. So I either read something before and then realized something more with this presentation, with this talk in this congress, or the opposite way. But they were more or less about the same year, same time. But that was the point. I saw them in a presentation and I decided, okay, I want to send them something.
So you have a background in paleontology. So what made you decide to go with something more on the still living side to submit, versus like I don't know dinosaurs or whatever?
Well, I think this was because of The Last of Us itself. The whole idea came out speaking with another friend of mine, which is deeply passionate with these things. And just after we finished the part two of The Last of Us, and we were really into that. So we spoke. This was the main theme, the main conversation theme between us for months after finishing the second game in the series. And at a certain point, I decided, okay, I would like to get more into what is really the universe of these things. I'm really interested in investigating and exploring more the background and the context of the act of narratives that I am interested in, like video games, but also books. So I don't really just stop on reading and playing something, but I always read more, go further into what is the universe behind the thing
Mm,
that was the story that was narrated. And this was the same for The Last of Us. And so I decided, okay, let's just try and see what can we tell by looking at this thing in with as I said in the paper, with a naturalistic point of view. I am a natural scientist in as a university background. I studied natural sciences, which is a particular thing in that is present in the Italian academic system. So it's a mix between biology and geology,
mm,
so I also have a background in this. So
mm,
when I still remember something from my
mm.
master, and so I decided, okay,
Yeah,
this
for
thing
sure.
is interesting. Let's try to do
Mm.
something with this.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of transferable like skills you learn as just a scientist in general that you can always apply across fields, I suppose. And yeah, I'm sure like it makes sense that a paleontologist would know a lot about biology as well. It's not like you just like studying a rock. There's more to it than
No.
that. Otherwise, you'd be a geologist instead. Um, so yeah, I can see that way. So like, what sort of things while you were writing the paper did you discover that either surprised you or like excited you in any way? Like, what were the interesting findings that you found and wrote about?
Well, okay. While we were preparing this, we started mainly me and my friend Alessio. We started by looking at the models of the infected. So the first thing that we made was basically describing them. And while describing them, we realized that there was clearly a pattern that you can recognize and that is used also when studying symbiosis relationship within parasites and hosts, that can be recognized within this video game um, thing, this interaction within the video game.
Mm,
And when you analyze parasitic interaction, there are four different ways in which you can go into that. So either phylogenetically speaking, so the relationship between the host and and other, or the parasite and the host and other members of their group, the biological mechanism, so how the host is actually interacting with the parasite and vice versa, and also two different things, which is the ontogenetical and the behavioral and the functional. Well,
mm,
behavior and functional are connected. So what we discovered was basically, well, of course, we don't have actually access to specimen. Fortunately, we don't have a pandemic of infecting
no, yeah. There's no
fungi.
samples to
Fortunately,
collect. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So we were not able to go into the biological, the mechanical thing, neither doing a phylogeny, but what we discovered, what we really were able to see, was that there was a pattern in terms of ontogenesis. So how the interaction between the fungi and the hosts were developing. So there was either a morphological change, the fungi coming out from the infected are more developed in what are considered later stages on the infection, which are less human in terms of morphology, and became covered with fungal bodies, something like that. And there was also modification in their behavior. So there are different behaviors involved in being in the earlier stages and then in the older stages. And this is either connected to the developing of the fungi inside the hosts, but also the main thing that we actually wrote and that is really interesting is that apparently there are two groups in terms of functionality and of behavior when looking at these things. So uh, we can clearly see that earlier stages, so stages 1, 2, and 3, runners, clickers, and runners, stalkers, and clickers, for people that are actually familiar with the terminology of the game, are more mobile and can fructificate and can actually spread the infection by biting other humans. So they are apparently more related to a spreading role. Whereas
Mm,
if you go and see the later stages, so basically bloaters and shamblers, they are less mobile, so they are usually staying in a single place. They are more aggressive in the game, and they are apparently not able to fructificate. So it seems that these older stages are not related with a role connected to actually spreading the infection, but to protecting the others that are spreading the infection, or the places where
mm,
fructification is going on. So really, even if we really understand that this was made basically because of needs for the game, like to make to present the player with challenges and something different in different parts of the game. This was really something that makes sense from a scientific and natural point of view, and this was really
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, for sure. I'm sure that the whoever consulted on the project for Naughty Dog was clever enough to include some kind of ecology with how they design the monsters, because
Yeah,
it's definitely present. It seems like it's like one large superorganism versus like just one or two like individuals, which is really cool, and it does add to like the overall experience when you see it playing out that way. Which I also enjoyed while I was playing The Last of Us.
yeah, totally.
And yeah, so like when you when you're writing a paper like this, like what are some difficult things there are to do, not having any real data that you can pull from, because it's not a thing that exists. Like,
Yeah.
what do you try and then do instead? Because I'm sure it's a similar thing for paleontology, because you don't have a complete set of data points. Because, well, you can explain that. Like, it's probably like similar, I think. So, like, what was your experience?
Well, yeah, as you said, the main thing is that we don't have actually thing that we can see and touch and analyze physically and directly. So the main problem is actually not to be able to test the hypothesis that we have and to actually get and collect more data if we have, you know, ideas that are not really explained from what we've seen. Of course, this is either well, this is both a limit, but it is also something that allows you to speculate a little bit more. And given that this is not really something that someone is actually thinking that you have to do, because you don't have the material at hand. So you are free to speculate more, and no one is expecting you to actually go really through it in a less, let's say, more rigorous way. So this is also actually letting us playing freely in these terms. But yeah, this is the main problem. So the thing was trying to understand at the beginning of the thing if there was something in the natural world that was actually comparable. And
Mm,
so if we could would if we were able to actually see something that we can explain under like what science tells us about the real nature that we are experiencing, which is actually the case. We do have find we did find something, some article on parasitoid interaction between fungi and ants that were connected to what was happening in The Last of Us. But this was the main problem, yeah, definitely, that
mm, mm.
we were playing with only the thing that we were seeing in the game.
Yeah, and you kind of have to try and extrapolate from these things that
Yeah,
are affecting, like mainly like arthropods, which are very different from human beings, far different.
yeah,
But it is a thing that happens in the natural world, and you can read about it in your paper, and I'm sure many like blogs and stuff online. It's even something that I talked about because I once did like a video essay about the anime Parasite with like a YTE. And it was like these spores of like aliens that like descended on like human beings and that like took over their brains and stuff and started operate like basically using them as like a meat machine. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the anime, but it the idea of what is a parasite versus something like that or something like the cordyceps fungi, which is it's not really a parasite because parasites like they still want you to stay alive.
Yeah,
um
it's a parasitoid actually. It's a
yeah,
parasitoid
so
interaction. Yeah.
it's something called a parasitoid, which is the one thing that I learned from making the video. So you do cover that in the paper, which is pretty cool. So going back to The Last of Us specifically, like what about the series that you enjoyed so much that you wanted to write a paper about it? Like what were your favorite moments and feelings while you were playing?
Okay. Well, I think that most of the people, when asked this kind of question, are probably expecting to answer the giraffe part, which is always mentioned. But I mean,
It's
there are two
classic.
moments. Yeah, that's a classic, and actually, it's a really cool scene in the first game. There are two moments. One in the, however, in one in the first one and one in the second one that really are example of what I enjoyed so much in playing the game. And the first one, in the first game, there was the part when you are. I don't want to make a lot of spoilers, but I mean the games are out since
Mhm.
time, but I think that they are still worth playing without any spoilers, especially the second one. But in the first one, there's a moment when you are interacting with two brothers that are staying for a while with the main characters. And
Mhm.
at certain point, one of the two is beaten by one of the infected, and the whole scene and the whole how the whole thing develops and how it is discovered. It's really something strong from a narrative point of view, and you are experiencing this thing as a main character, which is the power of video games contra, for example, film, movies, series, or books. And really, that moment destroys you when you are playing that part. And
Mhm.
this is really a power that I think that the thing that I enjoyed in The Last of Us. And it's a moment that I like to call a chocolate moment. So it's a moment when, and there are a lot of these in The Last of Us, when I had to stop to make a pause, go away from the console, eating some chocolate, and then going back to play after a while. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of moments like this. And there is another one in the second game, which is basically when you go down in the hospital in the main hospital in Seattle, and there's a moment when you are entering the emergency area, and before entering that emergency area, you really feel the thing like, okay, something is going to happen here. And then for a while nothing happened. You explore
Mhm.
the emergency areas, and there are no infected or no enemies around. And you can feel like, okay, I know that something is going on here. I
Yeah.
know I can, there's nothing, but I can still feel the tension within myself. So this is another moment when I came upon that part, and I stopped in front of the door of the emergency area, and I said, "Okay, I'm done for today. I'll be back playing tomorrow." Because really, this moment is so scary for me
Yeah, yeah,
experiencing these things,
yeah, yeah,
and really, how Naughty Dog uh, create these, and we're able to narrate the whole idea, the whole concept of the game, the core gameplay, even without doing anything, but just posing you in front of this thing and actually making you think, okay, this is the moment where something will happen, and you know that it's something that is going to be intense. Really, that was groundbreaking for me when playing the two games, both of them.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think um, it's. those two things are very like specific to, I think, like the zombie genre. It's like one of the zombie genre like enables you to like explore like parts of horror like you did with like feeling of anticipation, but also like
Mhm.
parts of drama and like relationships between people, because like when it comes to zombies there's always a chance that you can become one, and like,
Yeah.
you know, even if you're feel like you're all safe, like you still like your buddy or your brother or whatever could get bitten and infected, and you would want to keep them safe for as long as possible, but you also have a responsibility to the group, and that kind of dynamic I think is very well done with horror, with zombie genre in general. And yeah, so Last of Us made maximum use of the zombie type of genre, and they did it like really well, which is, yeah, commendable, that they managed to pull this game off, because it was really cool. And at the time that it came out, which I think was just before the PlayStation 4, yeah, it was probably the best thing that you could find in that
Mhm.
generation. Well, it was for me, and I think for a lot of people. Going back to science and paleontology in general, how did you actually get into wanting to study fossils and research and stuff like that? What was the spark that got you into
This is the $1 million question.
it?
I was always passionate with this kind of thing. As a kid, I was reading books and watching documentaries about nature in general. So not just fossils, but I also had um, I had books about fossils in general, not just dinosaurs, but all kind of fossils and nature. I also come from place in Italy, which is not really, well, it was not so urbanized at the time. So I was also in contact with nature. So it was kind of straightforward for me when I was at the end of high school to choose natural sciences as as a career, as university. And I have to admit that I started that thinking about becoming an ethologist, so studying behavior of animals. But that was not the path for me, and I understood that in the second year of the university of the bachelor. And then things get really random at this point and really serendipitous, because I was not really understanding what I would like to do. And then a friend of mine, which is with the university with me, told me we had to do some practicals during the bachelor. And he told me, well, there's this excavation and I would like to go and excavate. It was a cave in northern Italy with bare fossils. And he
Hmm.
told me, well, just come. We do have to do this kind of thing. So why don't you come? And I was like, oh, well, okay. I'm not sure, but yeah, why not? And that was the turning point. I actually went to excavate and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to go back to these things. Like my inner child came out suddenly and saying, okay, I'm here. I'm still here. I want to do that thing. Let's go back to that.
Mm, mm. For sure, definitely. Yeah, I also have a thing in common with wanting to be an ethologist at some point. I was also into animal behavior, specifically like cephalopods. I always found, yeah, octopus and cuttlefish really behavior really interesting. I want to get into it. Didn't manage it. I'm sure I have like a book here on behavior somewhere on this shelf. I can't see it now. So looking out to the future, you have any plans for doing any more geeky studies? Any other video game series? Like, what are your thoughts? Or are you taking a break for a while?
I do have something in mind, but I think it may be something in not in the near future, because I also have to focus
On work,
sometimes
yeah.
on what I actually have to do for my work. But yeah,
Write
I
the
do
real
have some
papers.
ideas.
Yeah.
Well, actually, my boss was very happy when I told him I am preparing this paper on for the Journal of Geek Science, and he told me, yeah, of course, you have to put our address on this. You have to say that you are from here, and I would also like to send something. So
It's
Good.
cool.
I was
Yeah,
very fortunate
that's
and
very
lucky of
forward
having
look
this kind of
thinking. Yeah,
thoughts.
which is really nice. Yeah.
But yeah, I do have some ideas. One is making something on the machines, the creatures from Horizon, like a
Okay.
taxonomy or something
Mm,
like that. But
yeah.
it's really something that will be in the future also because I still have to play the second one. So I don't know how the thing has changed after in the second game of the series. And
Mm,
another thing, which is less geek and more also into the scientific part, is to try to look at the nomenclature and how people name species after Star Wars, which is another of my great passions.
mm,
So looking at what kind of names, what kind of groups were named after Star Wars, either characters, planets, or people that are involved with Star Wars. I'm pretty sure somewhere there might be something named after George Lucas.
mm,
So this is something that I would really like to do, like analyzing all the names and try to understand if there are patterns of mm, names that are more easily used in these things,
mm.
or which kind of groups are more Star Wars sized, let's say, where
Yeah,
things are named after this.
for sure. That does sound very interesting because it, like, when you do like list out a name, like names of Star Wars things, they do seem to fit. Like, it like makes sense when you hear something, and like if you think of Skywalker, it like fits Star Wars. Like,
I do
so yeah,
have
there would be a.
one. Sorry, I do have one species. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Mm,
since I see the poster that you have back on your wall
oh, yes,
with the child, the
I do have the
Mandalorian child,
child. Yeah, Grogu.
I actually have a species named after it. It was published this year. It's a salamander from the Mycene of
Really,
Europe that is named, yeah, Euronecturus grogu. So he actually
Grogu.
named something.
Sweet, sweet. That's really cool. I need to like compile a list of all like geeky species names at some point. So yeah, thanks for notifying me. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
I'm
I,
very
I was
proud of that
I was
name,
just
really.
yeah I was just talking to Rodrigo about it in the last episode, and we were also discussing about how like just geek culture in general is just invading science, especially with like species names.
Yeah.
Is the one place we can put it that it might sound like like if you're not if you're not in the know, like you won't realize. But like
Mm.
if you're in the know, like it's definitely a reference, and it's always cool to hide little Easter eggs, I suppose, in your science. So yeah, well done for pulling that off. I'm not in the
Thanks.
field of naming things, so I don't think I'll ever get to one. But if I ever have the opportunity, I'll try my hardest to put a name in there. So, Andrea, why don't you let everybody know where they can find your stuff on the internet before we bounce?
Yeah, sure. They can find me in most social media, more or less. They can find me on Twitter and on Instagram, for example. And in both cases, they can find me as Andrew J House. Andrew like Andrew and House like House. And the J in the middle is either spelled in Instagram is J like Jay, and on Twitter is just the letter J between the Andrew and House. So it's kind of easy. And there's also if someone is interested in my scientific work, because I post mostly random stuff on social media, on this social media, not really always tied with either science or geeky thing, either just random thing that came to my mind or photos that I take. Uh, for scientific things, I have a ResearchGate profile, which is under my real name, Andrea Villa, and it's easy. You just have to look for the one which has the Last of Us paper on it,
Yeah,
because of course it is there. So these are the main
that's the way you identify yourself
online.
now. I wrote the Last of Us paper. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, thanks for joining, Andrea. It's been a fun chat. I'm sure we could go on for hours about this stuff, but it's a good place to cut. And I'm sure I'll have you on in the future when you do your next geeky study. So thanks for
yeah.
joining.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.